So, I'd like to talk to you about the Warriors. That's you're going to be covering more than the Warriors for us, but this is your area of expertise, which is important because it still remains one of the most relevant teams, one of the highest interest teams. However, as has been repeated routinely for the last 2.5 weeks now, I guess 3 weeks, the Warriors have not made a move in this offseason yet. It is not for lack of lining things up and trying. So I think as we were recording this on July 23rd, maybe there will have been a move by July 25th. We can't see the future, but Slater, what are we to make of the Warriors offseason thus far?
It's not that surprising. Maybe you thought they might chip in a minimum or two, or announce an agreement without an official press release, which means it's been signed. But their big ticket item was Jonathan Kuminga. There was a lot of signs leading up to his free agency that it could drag because of the frozen restricted free agent market, which, by the way, is not just a Jonathan Kuminga thing. I think we all know. But there's a lot of scar tissue in the relationship. There's a lot of dynamics at play. There's a lot of CBA mechanisms and reasons that we are sitting here on July 23rd, and there's been somewhat movement. There's I would categorize the Warriors this week, and we are talking on Wednesday. Again, people may not be listening until Friday, but I would categorize the Warriors this week as more motivated to get something done with Jonathan Kuminga and attempting to move the ball down the road a little bit. And I've always felt that the most likely scenario was a Kuminga reunion for various reasons. But it's still stagnant July 23rd for various reasons too that go back. It really goes back 4 years. I mean, it's a 4-year story with Kuminga, and I don't know how deeply you want to get into it, but that's why they're stagnant, because of Jonathan Kuminga's situation.
Yeah, you authored many stories about this rocky relationship for The Athletic over the years. Some of them were co-authored with our colleague again, the ESPN Shams Charania, where, I mean, there was sort of a legendary story where Kuminga was quoted. Were you on that story with Shams?
Yeah. There was two. So you're talking, I already know the one you're talking about.
Yeah.
This would have been his third season when he was, he had a really good third season if you look at it statistically. And there was a brutal home loss on the front end of a back-to-back to the Denver Nuggets, which will most be remembered from, remember Jokic hits like a 40-foot banker or something.
Oh my God, it was legendary. Yeah, of course.
Well, in that game, Kuminga played like 18 minutes, and he'd been playing well, and he had played well in his 18 minutes, but Kerr didn't go back to him. And it was a buildup of frustration of him not breaking through, of him, feeling the career moment, feeling his game getting to a level where he was waiting for a breakthrough. And that was a very criticizable decision that particular night by Kerr. And in the middle of the back-to-back, me and Shams dropped a story where, it was basically Kuminga losing faith in Steve Kerr.
He was quoted. Was he quoted?
It was. So he was quoted the next night about it because, again, front end of a back-to-back. They then play the next night. Kuminga plays like a career high in minutes. He's awesome. They beat the Raptors.
I remember.
And then post-game, he goes into great detail about how him and Steve had a meeting that morning and kind of discussed their, I guess, lack of communication at times. And it almost 24 hours later was viewed as like, hey, maybe this is a positive. And again, he actually finished that season, at least regular season, decently. But that's like one chapter of about 19 in this saga.
We don't have to go chapter and verse, but long story short, Kuminga and Steve Kerr have had a rocky relationship. And I don't know if he was the centerpiece of the two timelines, he and James Wiseman, but he certainly was a big cornerstone of the two timelines, and it hasn't worked out. And it seems, if I could say this broadly, and if I'm over generalizing, knock me back into line. When the Warriors have their best players out there, Kuminga doesn't necessarily seem to thrive. But when he gets a bigger role and the ball in his hands more, he tends to thrive, which is why a lot of people, including, I guess, Mr. Kuminga himself, might have seen a future outside of Golden State. But it hasn't worked out for various reasons, largely because restricted free agency is a B word. And that's the world he's living in right now.
Yeah. And he has had moments with the full cast, which has changed over his 4 years, where he has, had huge stretches, 6 weeks where he's averaging 18, 19, 20 on good volume. And But, I will say typically it's like, hey, during Draymond's suspension, the longer suspension was one of his real bust-out moments. During Andrew Wiggins' hiatus, everybody can probably remember Andrew Wiggins, or it was Kuminga's second year, missed basically from the All-Star break to the end of the season. And you go back, and this is Kuminga's second season. He was a massive rotation piece that helped drag them to the 6th seed right at the end. And then Andrew Wiggins showed up on the doorstep right before the playoffs, and he was basically pulled from the rotation. And when you trace some of Kuminga's frustrations, it is because there have been moments where he's felt like he has broken through. He has proved to Steve Kerr and the decision makers that it is time to maybe anoint him ready to be an every night guaranteed rotation player. And there just hasn't been as much of a trust and belief and backing. Call it immature, for a young player, but I think that often leads to his, bad transition defense, which can frustrate Kerr, lack of, physical rebounding, nights where he's kind of jogging up and down the floor and floating to the corner because when he doesn't feel that backing, has a mindset of like, all right, y'all just want me to, get out here and, not make a mistake because you're going to pull me if I make a mistake. So let me float to the corner. And again, I think that showed itself again at the end of his 4th season where they put him, in my opinion, in a very tough spot during the Rocket series. After pulling him, there was a couple times they had to plug him in, right? Remember Jimmy Butler misses game 3 at home and they start him after keeping him out of the rotation. He played 11 minutes. He played hard. He made some mistakes. He'd been on ice. And then game 7, remember they lose the 3-1 lead. It's 3-3. He had a couple bad moments in game 7, but that was like a really kind of difficult environment to be thrown in. And, with Jimmy Butler there, which goes back to your earlier point about like the full cast, particularly the Jimmy Butler, Steph Curry, Draymond Green full cast, it is kind of a misfit. But he would flip it, and you can flip the mindset where it goes, okay, Steph Curry tweaks the hamstring, and all the guys that you could say the Guy Santoses of the world who might play better as a 4th or 5th guy in the lineup and might, help get a hustle rebound and get back in transition and do that type of stuff. Well, guess what? When Steph Curry strains a hamstring, you can't go, hey, all right, take the ball, take Naz Reid off the dribble, score 20 tonight. Right. And it's like, well, that's valuable. And that will be valuable next season, won't it? I mean, let's say Al Horford is in tow, and clearly that's the Warriors' plan. We'll see if it's executed. But that would make 4 of their starters 35, 35, 37, 39. Al Horford doesn't play back-to-backs. We know some of the injury and the I don't want to say coasting that some of the other stars do, but you throttle up and throttle back during the regular season. They're going to need scoring. They're going to need athleticism. They're going to need pop during an 82-game regular season. And I think lost in a lot of what's going on right now with Kuminga is people aren't talking about how much I believe in a lot of people, including some in the Warriors, front office, even some in the team believe like he is needed at times. Will he be potentially minimized and benched in game 5, game 6 of the second round? Sure. That could, again, it could happen. Steve Kerr, gets to a moment where he just needs like defense and hustle and this, and he goes away from him. But guess what? Jimmy Butler misses 2 weeks next season. You need a scorer. You need a 5th-year, 6'7" wing who's going to go to the rim because there's other flaws on their roster that very much show themselves when one of their scorers is out.
They've also tried to trade him a couple of times that I'm aware of. They tried to trade him. They tried to trade him for Kevin Durant midway through this last season. They tried to trade him for Paul George last summer when they ended up not, the Clippers basically wouldn't agree to the trade. God knows how many other times he's been in discussions, but like at least 2 times they tried to trade him for a star player. I'm sure there were discussions with him and Jimmy Butler. He ended up not being in that deal. Obviously, ended up being Wiggins, the big name in the deal. But he's
the Durant trade, this deadline's very important here because you go back to last summer and there's a lot of even angst now, I'd say, about like he was extension eligible last summer, right? And it doesn't get done. Part of the reason it doesn't get done, and sure, the way it's been put to me is there was never any offers on the table. There was some dancing around of like,
word, as the word offer is a tough word for media to use, whether it's trade or contract or, offering a job to a head coach. The word offer is a difficult word. I think in I know, like with my editors, they'll be like, well, didn't they offer it? I'm like, well, hold on. Just be careful using the word offer, because when you use the word offer, you kind of got to defend it. And there's this language game that was played. So I understand what you're saying.
Yes. So what's important there, though, is part of the reason that the Warriors were hesitant to extend Kuminga last summer. And, while, numbers were discussed, and I think Jalen Johnson getting 5 years, 150 gave a target that obviously Kuminga and their his representation, they had ambitious, thoughts about what it could be. I'm of the belief, and I've been told, that they would have taken 5 for 150 if it was ever on the table. It wasn't on the table. And part of the reason the Warriors didn't necessarily want to put an offer on the table and never actually did put a firm, sign on the dotted line type offer on the table is because it would have poisoned pilled his contract. And they were very much in flexibility mode because they wanted to be able to trade him. And if you sign him to that deal, he's nearly impossible to trade last season. And as you mentioned, they almost traded him for Kevin Durant, which, by the way, I think the Warriors, you could argue whether it's better that they got Butler or Durant, but I'll tell you where Jonathan Kuminga wouldn't mind being right now, an extended member of the Phoenix Suns. But
which was probably their plan if they had gotten that deal done. And let me just say that when it comes to poison pill, just so our listeners know what that is, because it's a little bit of an obscure reference.
Yeah.
If you have signed a contract, if you're in your rookie deal, and you're in your third year, you're going into your fourth year, and you sign a contract, you become much harder to trade. I'm not going to get into the chapter and verse of it because I'm afraid I'll make a mistake and then I'll have to retract something, and Bobby Marks will have to answer for me. But you become harder to trade. But by the way, isn't that also an issue for this year? Not so much the poison pill, but
base year compensation, another terrific CBA term that everyone has to go to their dictionary and look up.
Yeah, but just in general, even if they sign him, I think there's a possibility, as they're negotiating, I'm not saying they would announce this, but as they're negotiating, they're thinking, we want to sign him to a contract that we might be able to trade.
I feel comfortable saying both sides, as they're working through this right now, are discussing the idea of having, tradable contracts with the understanding that if you have to have him to at least January 15th, which you would if you signed the contract, he could bust out and be a 22 point per game scorer that they don't want to trade. Situations changed in the league, as and certainly situations can change into January. But I think both sides are comfortable if a deal is eventually done, which I think the qualifying offer's on the table. I think
which is $8 million, right?
Yeah, 7.9. I think a drawn out process that ends several ways is still on the table. But if a compromise contract, I've been calling it, happens, that is definitely going to be with the understanding that it possibly could get traded come January 5th.
Yeah. So, and if you take just for the listeners, if you take the qualifying offer, it means that you get a no trade clause automatically.
Yep.
For reasons I won't get into. If you get traded, you lose your bird rights. That's why you get a no trade clause. Complicated. You lose the potential to re-sign with your team, basically, and basically you destroy your relationship. There's been a few cases, and first off, qualifying offers are relatively rare, and even more rare are guys who take the qualifying offer and then stay with their team long term. I have maybe seen it 2 or 3 times in 23 years, where a guy. First off, I have only seen a couple dozen qualifying offers. That's pretty rare. Anyway, the reason I wanted to go over all this is because when I have Q&As on social media, which I do this time of year, I get a ton of questions about Jonathan Kuminga. There's a lot of Warriors fans out there.
Entering his 17th season, and he sat down with Complex, talked about how much longer he plans on playing. Take a listen.
I do know I'm kind of just taking it in 2-year chunks, just to know, like, you have to give yourself something and some motivation to kind of go after. For us, like, I talked to all the guys who have been in this situation where they've extended their prime, and there are more ungraceful endings than there are, I tip the cap and like that type of thing. But I just want to be in a position where I've accomplished, or I put myself in a position where I can say I've done everything I can to, get everything out of this game, and hopefully I have, my health and the choice to say I'm
hanging
good.
it up.
I'm good. I'm not nowhere close to that though.
For sure. So we got some more years from it.
For sure.
Oh, man. Well, Steph fans will love that. The rest of the Western Conference, maybe not so much. Welcome to NBA Today. I'm Vanessa Richardson, and, of course, for Malika Andrews. Joined here today in our LA studios, we've got senior writers Ramona Shelburne, Tim Bontemps, and we are also joined by Anscape's David Dennis Jr. DDJ, you've been around Curry for over 20 years. What does Steph's last stretch of his career look like?
So here are two things I could say about what the end of Steph Curry's career is going to look like. That'll sort of be a testament to the greatness that I expect. One is, no matter if this is 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the line, when Steph Curry gets hot in a given quarter, it'll always be the greatest show in basketball, maybe the greatest show in sports. It'll be something that people will always be calling about and saying, hey, Steph is catching fire and he's raining threes, no matter when that happens in his career. The other thing is that at the very last game, important game that he plays, again, whether it's 3 years, 4 years, whatever, when he crosses half court, he's going to get double teamed because he will always be a guy who strikes fear in defenders until he, walks away from the game. He will always be somebody who will be a versatile offensive dude. And all respect to my guy Steph, he's never quite relied on athleticism and explosiveness and all that stuff. So he doesn't have to worry about that falling by the wayside. The shot will be there, the ball movement will be there, and he will be somebody who will be part of a team that can be at least making noise in the playoffs just by virtue of having him on that team.
You hear David saying 3 years, 4 years. Tim, Steph turns 38 in March. So how can the Warriors maximize the rest of his career?
I mean, I think it's what they've been doing, right? They traded for Jimmy Butler last year. They've gone out and tried to get, talked about getting LeBron James and obviously some things that are more fantasy trades than real trades in the past. And they've made other moves to try to get better. We'll see what happens the rest of the summer once they get the Jonathan Kuminga situation sorted out. I think it's likely that Al Horford winds up there. DeAnthony Melton, who was there last year before he tore his ACL, could wind up there too. The Warriors are going to try to straddle a couple things, right? If they can get a move where they can go all in to get another star at some point, I'm sure they'll try to do that. Joe Lacob and Mike Dunleavy and the Warriors front office has always been extraordinarily aggressive in trying to maximize how good this team can be. But Steph Curry also understands, as he said there, that he has chosen to finish his career with the Warriors. He wants to play his whole career there, as he should. And so the goal is for everybody involved to try to have the Warriors be as good as they can be for the rest of Steph's career, and for Steph to finish his career as a one-team player and go down like Tim Duncan and Kobe Bryant and Dirk Nowitzki and some of these all-time great players who have I think the special way their career played out, where they get to win a title and spend their whole career playing for one franchise.
He said, I'm going to take this in 2-year increments. And I think what's great that happened last year when they traded for Jimmy Butler is they finally have clarity now. This is what they're doing. They're maximizing the Steph Curry next 2 years. But he also said, I can see myself playing for 3 or 4 years. Right. And so I don't know what happens after those 2 years, but I do know they have picked a lane. There was this two-timeline era for a while. They were kind of trying to bring along Kuminga and some of those other young guys and say, you guys are going to be the torch, you're going to pass the torch to those. That's not happening anymore. This is now Steph Curry's all in. We're just going to keep making trades and trying to maximize these 2 years. Steve Kerr was lined up with him. Jimmy's lined up with him. Draymond Green's lined up.
Yeah, all the veterans.
So, you know what? For the next 2 years, they got clarity. And I think Steph will, as David said, I think he does age well. I just can't believe he's going to be 38. That's unbelievable. He's still, I was going to say he still looks like he's 12, but then I see videos of him earlier in his career, and I'm like, oh, no.
Yeah.
He looks like he's 12 and now 15 or 17.
Well, speaking of age, he's not the only unk in the league. At the age of 37 in just over 4 months, Steph is the 8th oldest player currently on an NBA roster. Now, he will go down a spot when Al Horford inevitably signs somewhere. Steph trails a group that includes CP3 and LeBron James. And just in case you were wondering, the oldest player since 1950, how about this name? Kevin Willis. You guys remember him?
Willis?
He ended his career in April of 2007 at the age of 44 years and 224 days. LeBron would need to play on opening night of the 2020-30 season to pass Willis. So in a league that seems to be getting younger and younger and younger, LeBron and Steph continue to just really push that needle, both making all-NBA second team last season. DDJ, do you think Steph and LeBron have one more title run in their careers?
Look, the last thing I'm going to do is sit here and count Stephen Curry and LeBron James out. I'm not doing it. And with the parity in the league, who knows what will happen in the next few years. They can slide in, injuries happen for other teams, things like that. Who knows? I'm not counting those dudes out. But what's the most fascinating thing about this is the LeBron side of this. Steph, as we said, we kind of know what these next few years are going to be like. He's going to be a Warrior. They're going to retool in a couple years. They're going to figure this out. LeBron James, at the beginning of February, we felt like we knew what the end of his career was going to look like. He's going to play with the Lakers for a couple years, try to get a championship, and that'll be it. The Luka Doncic thing, adding him has changed the trajectory of the Lakers, and it's changed the trajectory of LeBron James's career. Now we know, I can imagine he's going to finish this year with the Lakers, despite all the stuff that him and Rich Paul have said and everything's happened in the offseason. But the year after that, I have no clue what that year of LeBron's career looks like. The Lakers don't know. LeBron doesn't know. I don't know if he'll be a Laker. I don't know if he'll end up at another team with another contender. This is probably the most question marks we've had about LeBron in his career since the beginning. The guy plans out everything. Now so much is up in the air, and that leaves a possibility of a championship run, or who knows, as he closes this thing out.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the LeBron James situation will be interesting to see how it plays out over the next several months and over the next years to see where he plays next season and how this season plays out, presumably his final year with the Lakers. But I think when you look at where the league is sitting right now, we had a team last year that won 68 games, won the title, had 2 players over 27 on the roster, and their oldest player was 31. And they just gave the 3 stars on their team, who are all in their mid-20s or younger, about $1 billion, it felt like, combined in long-term contracts, right? So they obviously need some health. Obviously, see the Oklahoma City Thunder raising the Larry O'Brien trophy there. They need some health and some luck to be able to continue on and be the team that ends this era of parity that we're in. But if you look at how the playoffs played out, we saw the Pacers in the championship round with the Thunder, another young team with depth. You saw the Knicks, a pretty young team with a decent amount of depth, and Minnesota Timberwolves, again, another team with a young group, a young nucleus led by Anthony Davis. I think we're seeing the league trend towards younger teams, deeper teams, being able to hold up in the physicality and the intensity and the pure athleticism you need to succeed in the league right now. So we'll see about teams like the Warriors and the Clippers and the Lakers that are more built around veteran players, older teams. But I think we're seeing a bit of a sea change, and I think the Thunder finally are positioned to be the team to end this era of parity we've been in and create the next dynasty in the league.
So I could have sat here last July and said a very similar thing about the Celtics. I think I probably did in July. And then the year before that, I think we said the same thing about the Nuggets, who had won a championship and had this young core that seemed like they had just hit their prime at the right time. And we just keep having new champions. Like each year, we think somebody is destined to go be the next dynasty. There is another, they seem built for success in the long term. And each year, it doesn't happen. And so as much as I agree with you, Tim, that the Thunder are extremely well positioned, they finally broke through, it seems like they could win for the next 5 years, all evidence in the NBA for the last 6-7 years has been that somebody else is going to win. And when you go, now it's 27-year-olds winning, and this year it was obviously 25-year-olds winning. Well, what if it swings back and it's the old teams winning? What if it's just the healthiest team winning? And so I'll never count LeBron and Steph out because those guys still are playing at all NBA levels. And I think, look, if you say who's better positioned this year, probably the Warriors, because they have clarity. They're not trying to save for Luka Doncic's next 5 years. They're just in it for the next 2 years with Steph.
Yeah, David, we'll give you the last word on this one.
I was talking about LeBron and